Welcome back, dear friends, to yet another lecture on postmodernism. And in the last few lectures, we tried to describe parody, pastiche, simulacra, virtual reality, black humor, constructivism, intertextuality, etc. And in this video, today we shall try to understand metafiction and historiographic metafiction. Metafiction and historiographic metafiction. What is metafiction? The word meta means about. So therefore, metafiction means fiction that is about fiction. Fiction that is about fiction. Now, it is a fiction that thinks and talks about itself. So the story that we read is about the stories. Then it is metafiction. Now, metafiction occurs in fictional stories when the story examines the fiction itself, the constructedness of the fiction itself. Now, metafiction is a form of literature that emphasizes its own constructedness in a way that consciously reminds the reader to be aware that they are viewing or they are reading a fictional work. So, self-reflexivity. It continues to tell the reader that you are reading a fiction. A fiction constructs worlds through language, and fiction thus constructs reality. So, fiction is constructing reality through language. Now, fiction is a construction of reality rather than a reflection of reality. Thus, reality is often regarded as a construct instead of an objective truth. Now, metafiction is a literary device that explores the question of how human beings construct their experience of the world, how they construct. Thus, metafiction is a literary device that is used to draw attention to a work's status as a work of imagination rather than reality. So it is used also as a form of parody or tool to undermine literary conventions and to explore the relationship between literature and reality, literature, life and art, etc. So it is constructedness, telling the reader that you are reading a fiction, self-reflexivity. Now, the term metafiction was coined in 1970 by William S. Gass in his work Fiction and the Figures of Life. Fiction and the Figures of Life. Now, metafiction is associated with the postmodern literature, but traces of this metafiction can be found in much earlier works of fiction, like even in Canterbury Tales, which was written in 1387 by Geoffrey Chaucer. There are elements of metafiction. Or Don Quixote or Don Quixote, which was written in 1605 by Miguel de Cervantes. There are elements of metafiction. The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy by Lawrence Sterne, Tristram Shandy. In it also we can find elements of metafiction. Or Vanity Fair, which was written in 1847 by William Makepeace Thackeray. Now, metafiction becomes very popular in the 1960s. Even though traces of it can be found in the earlier works, it becomes popular only in the 1960s, in the postmodern period. Now we shall see some of the best examples of metafiction. The first one that we can remember is the Lost in the Fun House, which was written in 1968 by John Barth. Lost in the Fun House. Now, John Barth is an American author, and Barth's Lost in the Fun House explicitly explores the author's self-referential placement within the text. The author not only becomes a character in the story, it is also a written feature about writing, which aligns itself entirely with Linda Hutchion's beneficial definition of metafiction. She says, fiction about fiction, that is, fiction that includes within itself a commentary on its own narrative. A fiction that includes within itself a commentary on its own narrative and or linguistic identity. So that is what Linda Hutchion would say about metafiction. The second example that we can remember is The French Lieutenant's Woman, which was written in 1969. It is a historical fiction by John Fowles. The given novel, The French Lieutenant's Woman, is not a fiction that presents the illusion of reality as an actual experience. Instead, it is a metafiction that makes the readers aware of the illusion. It makes the structure and creation of the novel as important a feature as the storytelling capabilities by calling attention to itself. So there is a lot of self-referentiality within the novel. The third important or famous example that we can remember about metafiction is The Crying of Lot 49, which was published in 1965 by Thomas Pynchon. Thomas Pynchon's, this is the shortest novel of Thomas Pynchon. It also contains a lot of metafictional elements. We can talk about different forms of metafiction. The first one that we can remember is explicit or implicit metafiction. Now, this form of metafiction, it uses clear metafictional elements. A narrator explaining the process of creating the story they are telling is an example. It comments on its own artificiality. Now, in the explicit metafiction, explicitly comments on its artificiality. But implicit metafiction does not directly comment on its artificiality, but uses various techniques and relies on the reader's capacity to recognize these artificial devices. So, implicit metafiction is described as a mode of showing. Explicit metafiction is a mode of telling. The second one is direct or indirect metafiction. Now, direct metafiction establishes a reference within the text that one is reading, reference within the text. The indirect metafiction consists in metafictional or meta references external to the text. The third type of metafiction is critical or non-critical metafiction. Now, critical metafiction aims to find the artificiality or fictionality of a text in some critical way, which is frequently done in postmodern fiction. Now, non-critical metafiction, it does not criticize or undermine the artificiality or fictionality of a text and can, for example, be used to suggest that the story that one is reading is authentic or not, etc. So, critical and non-critical. The fourth type is generally media-centered or fiction-centered metafiction. Medium-centered or fiction-centered metafiction. All metafiction deals with the media quality fiction and is media-centered. But in some cases, there is an additional focus on the truthfulness. There is an additional focus on the inventedness or fictionality of a text. So, these are the four types of metafiction that we can remember. Some critics regard metafiction signified the decadence of the novel and an exhaustion of the artistic capabilities of the medium. But some would even call it as the death of the novel. But others viewed it positively. The self-consciousness of fictional writing will help to gain deeper understanding of fiction, and it is a path that will lead to innovation. So that is something about metafiction, some examples of metafiction, different types of metafiction, etc. Let us also comment on another topic called historiographic metafiction. Historiographic metafiction. Now, what is historiographic metafiction? Historiographic metafiction is a type of postmodern novel. The term historiographic metafiction was coined by the Canadian literary theorist Linda Hutcheon in late 1980s. The term is used for the works of fiction which combine literary devices of metafiction and historical fiction. So, historiographic metafiction combines the literary devices of metafiction and historical fiction. Thus, it combines two things. First, the characteristic of metafiction, that is self-referentiality. It means that the literary works keep on reminding the reader that he or she is reading a novel. It is self-reflexive. So, metafiction. The second aspect of historiographic metafiction is that it has the qualities of a historical fiction. So, what is historical fiction? The work contains historical images, historical personages and historical settings. So, thus historiographic metafiction combines the literary devices of metafiction as well as historical fiction. In the words of Linda Hutcheon in Poetics of Postmodernism, works of historiographic metafiction are those well-known and popular novels which are both intensely self-reflexive and yet paradoxically also lay claim to historical events and historical personages. So it combines two literary devices, metafiction and historical fiction. In historiographic metafiction, there are frequent allusions to other artistic or historical literary texts. That is intertextuality, which we have learned, frequent reference to other texts. Now, that is done to show the extent to which works of both literature and historiography are dependent on the history of discourse. Now we shall also see some of the examples of historiographic metafiction. So some examples we need to remember. The first example that we can remember about as historiographic metafiction is by Shakespeare, Pericles and the Prince of Tyre, which were published nearly in 1608. They are examples of historiographic metafiction. John Fowles, the work by John Fowles, The French Lieutenant's Movement, which was published in 1969, is an example of historiographic metafiction. Though Mason and Dixon, which was published in 1997 by Thomas Pynchon, is also an example of historiographic metafiction. So my dear students, we have discussed a topic called historiographic metafiction. We also have seen about metafiction. Please make a short summary of these two concepts as you listen to the lecture. Have a nice time. Please stay safe at home. Thank you for your patient listening.